Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at how the demigods of Slain live. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. A hard blow. You hit the ground. Your small arms and legs tremble. You struggle greatly just to stand again. With the last of your strength, you pull yourself up using your scythe and take up your fighting stance once more, only to be hurled across the room by yet another strike. This time, your opponent doesn't wait for you to get up. As you barely manage to sit upright again, a powerful kick hits you square under the chin, and once more, you're on the ground after soaring through the air. Your body can't take it anymore. Your mind longs for rest, for peace, for even a spark of comfort. But you know none of that will be granted to you by your opponent. No rest, no peace. Only the fight. Instinctively, automatically, you angle the shaft of your scythe to block the next kick, only for your opponent to twist on their heel and brutally strike your ribs, which immediately break. You taste blood, and breathing becomes nearly impossible. Your limbs become numb, your ears ring, and your tear-blurred vision feels as though you were using one of your ancestors' toys, a small rectangular device that through glass and magic you don't understand can capture the world within that rectangle. Without moving a step, the device can zoom closer or farther away from what it sees. And right now, you feel as you zoomed out far too quickly, the world spins, and you no longer know which way is up and which way is down. "Stop!" a voice calls from the sidelines. You know that voice. It belongs to the only person who truly cares for you, the one who comforts you when you cry, who gives you your favorite food, who makes you feel warm and safe. "Stop! She's still just a child!" Your mother, in a calm, cold tone, tells the maid, the very person who has cared for you since you can remember, to stay out of it. She says the training is important and that you are strong enough by now to endure even a resurrection spell if necessary. And after you have been healed, after the fatigue and pain have left your body, it will all start again from the beginning. You know your mother doesn't love you. She never had. She's only doing her duty to the state, to her ancestors, just as you must do yours. Keep fighting, learning, losing, and keep becoming stronger. More and more power, that's what matters in this world. You know you have to show strength, not for yourself, not for your country, your bloodline, and certainly not for your mother, but for your maid, who would otherwise worry about you. And so, scythe in hand, you go back into the fight and you wake up. The dream and the trauma once again fade into the back of your mind, though faint tears can still be seen at the corner of your eyes by a keen observer. The woman standing before you is someone you have fought besides and against through life and death. A fellow member of the Black Scripture, just like you, and yet so distant. You vaguely remember striking her down once to humble her arrogance and keep her in check, as you have done so for a century. Her voice trembles, her words come out hastily, she acts submissive and afraid. Her codename is Infinite Magic, a powerful caster who floats upon her magic orb. And that orb is hers, as is the rest of her outfit, for as long as she can still fight with it. After that, another member of the Black Scripture will inherit this artifact, a relic of your very ancestors, the 6 great gods who founded your homeland, the Theocracy of Slain, 600 years ago, and saved humanity from otherwise certain extinction. You would like to speak with her as an equal, to connect, to exchange thoughts, but to her, You are an object of pure terror, a demigod who commands fear and respect. With many of your other team members, you've managed to rebuild somewhat normal, collegial relationships, but she still fears you. And now it is revealed to you, after more than 100 years, you will finally have the opportunity to avenge your mother, your homeland, and first and foremost, your loveless childhood. The man who kidnapped and violated your mother is now your next target. You will go behind enemy lines, infiltrate the royal palace of the hated elves, and eliminate their king, Theocracy, your own father. With a graceful hand movement, you adjust your hair so that it once again hides your long pointed ears. Your shame would be far too great to be seen as a half-elf, even though your colleagues already know what you are. You kneel before the cardinals of your nation. Each cardinal represents not only one of the 6 sects, earth, wind, fire, water, light and darkness, into which the Theocracy is divided by faith, and yet united through it. Each of these 6 faiths within the Theocracy's pantheon worships not only a god, but one of them also worships one of your ancestors. You are born of their bloodline, and you have awakened that blood within you. With their divine artifacts upon your own body and their spear in hand, you fight at the vanguard of the strongest human force there is, against monstrosities that could otherwise destroy not only your homeland, your faith, and your bloodline, but the entirety of humankind itself. You set out to eliminate an undead threat that has once again begun to stir. Elder Coffin Dragonlord. Your route will take you and the Black Scripture past the city of Irantel, an outpost of a hopelessly corrupt kingdom, and the place where a traitor from your own ranks, Clementine, seemingly currently hides. She is powerful, but no match for you. In truth, nothing can harm you. No one but your own kind has ever been able to defeat you. And Antilane Heran Fosh, a godkin older than your father, has never once lost to you either. But other than them, only the dragons seem to be a true threat to your own kind. And as usual, she will not accompany you. She will stand guard, protecting the powerful relics of your own ancestors. But all the other members of the Black Scripture also carry divine relics upon their own bodies. And you are further supported by a wield-of-a-world item, Downfall of Castle and Country, a weapon capable of putting any being under complete mind control. Even an undead dragon would likely be powerless against it. And so, a mighty enemy could be turned into a mighty ally, perhaps one strong enough to restore the Theocracy's full foreign political power and agency. For you know of Antilane's strength, yet because of the Platinum Dragonlord's pressure, the Theocracy has not yet been able to unleash its most powerful weapon, even though there has been a constant war with the elves for as long as you can think. And with these thoughts in mind, you set out, at the head of your very own troops. The slain Theocracy at the beginning of the 6th century, after the arrival of the 6 players who found it slain and who saved humanity from otherwise certain destruction, was in a precarious position. Even before the arrival of Ainz, chaos burned brightly in every corner of this world. The Dragon Kingdom under Draudilon Auriculus was repeatedly invaded by the Beastmen. Their incursions, at least thus far, had always been repelled by one of the scriptures. But again, they attack. They raid, pillage, and devour humankind. The Riestal's kingdom had become so corrupt and incompetent that the Theocracy had to help the Empire conquer it before its decay, crime, and neglect dragged all of humanity down with it, all while avoiding conflict with Arkland and its dragon counselors. At the same time, the Theocracy waged a war lasting for over a century by now against Zeshi's father, the elven king Theocracy and his kingdom, who had defiled and violated her mother. That act destroyed whatever fragile trust once existed between elves and humans, a trust that had previously been considered unshakable. Thus, Slayn no longer had the strength to deal with the other demi-human and heteromorphic threats along the Holy Kingdom's borders. To make matters worse, Clementine defected from the Theocracy and joined a cult of the undead, Zurnon, which she had probably served all along. And so, even before Ainz's arrival, the Theocracy was already in full crisis mode. Within this context, it becomes clear why Zesshi never truly had a childhood, why even if her mother had loved her, their childhood would have only been a preparation for battle, for war, until her end. Her strength is something that Slayn must constantly and relentlessly use for humanity's survival, and at the very least as a powerful deterrent. To keep the treasures, to keep the artifacts, the day-affected relics of your own deities safe from outside threats and from traitors from within. Without the two godkin serving in the Black Scripture, it would lose a massive portion of its combat power. They are absolutely vital. Just for context, when the Black Scripture is at full strength, it also includes Zesshi, the extra seat of the Black Scripture, and its captain, the younger godkin, who always reminded me a bit of Vayne Solidor from Final Fantasy XII. And a being around level 88, and a godkin who, according to Sheltier's admittedly blurred memories, for she was lost in a blood frenzy state at the time, was stronger than Solution Epsilon, one of the Pleiades battlemates and a skilled assassin, are a force to be reckoned with. A force that would even be a threat to perhaps one of the Floor Guardians. After losing the last of its original players, the so-called God of Death, Soshana, an overlord with a character build similar to that of Ainz himself, the Slayn Theocracy now needs every spark of fighting strength it can muster to keep humanity's enemies in check. Only when Platinum Dragonlord became occupied with Ainz did Slayn finally dare to send Zesshi against the Elven King Hugen, because otherwise Platinum Dragonlord might stir, might intervene, might attack, and spell the end for the true defender of humanity, for without it, humanity would most certainly fall and be devoured by its many enemies. And without all of these overlapping crises, Slayn would probably be working alongside the Riesta's kingdom to at least purge the Hills of Rebellion, or to finally push back the Beastman kingdom once and for all. But the sheer fragmentation of humanity forces the Theocracy to keep relying on its demigods, and the state has likely done so for at least half a millennium. Because one crisis follows the other. And interestingly, the Slayn Theocracy has also succeeded in something that the Elf King Hugen failed to ever achieve, the awakening and the preservation of the divine bloodlines. For where Hugen had countless children, probably several thousand, only Zesshi, who grew up in the Theocracy of Slayn, became a godkin, capable of realizing her full potential. All the others remained roughly below level 30, despite their vast numbers. So all of the offspring of the Elf King, other than Zesshi, was pathetically weak compared to her. In comparison, the leader of the Black Scripture, a full-blooded human, if you discount the God's blood part, let it slip in a conversation with Zesshi that he will soon marry, and he will not take a harem of women, but at most 2 of them, to preserve the bloodline. In other words, Slayn has somehow gathered and applied so much knowledge about the awakening and the awakening process of the divine blood that over the centuries it has managed to preserve those lineages and repeatedly produce powerful godkins, beings capable of defeating monstrous enemies single-handedly. And again, the power of these godkins cannot be overstated in the context of the New World. Through their rigorous training and their seemingly high level cap, they have developed a strength that can even make mighty dragons tremble in fear and sheer terror. For instance, the frost dragon Olasir Dark Halil Jarl was able to gather a harem of other dragons and sire dozens of children, essentially the Rudius Gererat among dragons, and he had only reached level 46. Even so, through his power, his brood, and his subjugated people, the Quagoa, he brought the dwarves to the brink of extinction, and had he succeeded, he would have greatly expanded the vassal kingdom under Periuru, claimed a new horde, or possibly found finally the key to the dwarves' treasury vault. And he did all of this to defeat and subjugate the frost giants, with whom the ice dragons had been at war since ancient times. Bit by bit he could have seized control over all of the Elysian mountains. And if not he, then in time his descendants might have also conquered the empire of Baharut. By contrast, Fluda Paradane managed to defeat a single Death Knight, only because he and his students could fly, while the Death Knight could not. And of course he lacked also the ranged attacks necessary to shoot them down. And a Death Knight is just a level 35 being, though admittedly a tough one. And yet he, Fluda, the mighty Triad Wizard, was so powerful that he had single-handedly saved the Empire on multiple occasions. But none of these mighty beings would even come close to matching the young godkin who leads the Black Scripture. Equipped with the armor of his ancestors and supported by the Black Scripture, he and Zesshi together could wipe out hundreds of Death Knights and Soul Eaters. And just 3 Soul Eaters had once been enough to annihilate nearly 100,000 beastmen. In other words, the two godkins could easily conquer nearly any other nation, or at least destroy any army militarily. It's not the lack of strength that endangers Slayn, but rather the sheer number of simultaneous crises it always had faced. If fully unleashed, the Black Scripture could sweep the battlefield clean of the invading beastmen, and as mentioned earlier, it's this immense strength the godkins possess that turns their entire lives into a single endless battle, from their brutal training in childhood to constant deployments or guard duty, or until the day they grow too old and too weak to fight. This burden, this kind of life, demands a terrible price, and even Zeshi's loyalty had been tested by it. She has often wondered for whom she actually fights, for her treatment at the hands of Slayn has not been kind. She has no strong emotional attachments, not to her homeland, not to her comrades, and her profession as enforcer brings her no joy, since her power and status force her to keep the other members of the Black Scripture in check all of the time. Because of this, Zesshi has often asked herself what she is really fighting for. It was only after she was nearly annihilated by Mara's strongest spell that she made the decision to fight for her country and for humanity before passing out. In other words, someone like Renna might well have been able to make her switch side without a fight at all. As for what Zeshi's life will likely be under Ainz Ulgon now that she had been captured, that can only be speculated upon. And let's start with the basic requirements, what it actually takes to level up in the new world of Overlord. Well, just like in Yggdrasil Online, fighting, experiencing hardship and mastering it, and of course experience points. But before that, perhaps we should ask ourselves, why can people even level up in the medieval fantasy world of Overlord? What's the reason behind all of this? And why I just mentioned a video game? Well, we know that this level system apparently originates from Yggdrasil Online, a dive MMORPG, because of its strong similarities to the game's mechanics. However, it also seems to have been expanded upon and changed a bit. And Riku Aganea once hinted that when the players from another dimension arrived, the use of wild magic, the magic of the soul, the original magic of the new world, became much harder to use. And he also said that the players from Yggdrasil corrupted his own world and polluted and spoiled it. So I suspect that the arrival of the players, the materialization of their characters, their avatars, their magic and their items, especially of course their world items, was only made possible through wild magic itself. In other words, a large portion of the world's wild magic, the new world's native magical energy, is now being used to sustain tier magic, and the game-like system and mechanics from Yggdrasil Online. You can imagine it like this. It's as if you were running a virtual smartphone with a different operating system inside your own current phone or your own personal computer. The resources for this virtual system comes from the original one, making the base system below so much slower. That also means wild magic stands above tier magic and can therefore theoretically and most likely practically bend or break the game's rules. That might explain why there exists a wild magic ring that allows a warrior like Cocytus to gain 5 additional levels in martial classes while he wears it, even though he is already at level 100, the maximum level for players. And now that we have clarified all of this, let's move on to the first major obstacle that many beings in the New World would face, not just humans but also dwarves, elves, ogres and goblins. A kind of hard level cap for almost anybody. For example, no matter how hard Climb trained, or how much he is trained by others who are stronger than him, his training never made him stronger than a gold-ranked adventurer. In other words, he probably couldn't surpass about level 20, roughly speaking. And this applies to the majority of fighters. Only a few exceptionally gifted individuals seems to be born with the potential to, through relentless training of course, break past this very first level barrier that keeps like 99% of the population below the level 20. For example, Zesshi was able, without the help of the Ring of the Dragon Lord, to surpass level 20 and reach at least level 26, and with the aid of his wild magic ring, he can enter the realm of heroes, a rank that is usually said to be above level 30, meaning that Zesshi again, thanks to this wild magic ring that raises his level to 5 additional ones in warrior classes, his total level needs to be 26, that he can at least reach the 31 level. Brain Anglaus, his rival, managed, without the aid of the dragon ring, but with all of his might, his skills, his dedication and a lot of potions, to unleash an attack as powerful as that of a level 40 warrior. So he likely reached the level 30 naturally and likely above. And again, level 30 is known as the realm of heroes, and only about 1 in a million humans can reach it without any assistance, and even then, it requires an enormous amount of training and talent. But we know that äzesshizetsumei is already level 88, far beyond any of these limits. And we also know that she descended from a bloodline of players, the bloodline of players who found it slain, the so-called 6 great gods. And that her father, Hugin, the Elven King, is likewise the son of an Elven player, one of the 8 great kings. In other words, Zesshi descends from 2 separate player bloodlines, and with her current level, she has already surpassed all normal barriers. And if player blood functions in such a way that once awakened, it removes all level restrictions up to the hard cap of level 100, the maximum level players could get at Yggdrasil Online, then Zesshi could potentially reach level 100 naturally. However, if reaching that final level requires pure, 100% player blood, and since the captain of the Black Scripture, who is also a godkin, seemingly is stronger than Solution Epsilon and Lupus Regina Beta, but not nearly as strong as an unarmed and unarmored Chartier Bloodfallen in her Blood Frenzy mode. It could be that he cannot surpass level 67, and therefore it could be that Zesshi, who has probably already reached an age well over 100 years, might be unable to get beyond level 90, having simply been lucky enough that enough of her player blood awakened to grant her up to 90% of a player's power, or at least that potential. And in the first case, Ainz can obviously just let Zesshi continue to train normally, without any issue. But in the latter one, Ainz would have to find a way to break her level cap first. And you might be wondering now, would Zesshi even be accepted in the Great Tomb of Nazarick, for whatever reason? And I think there are several possibilities for that. In fact, I've already made a separate video on this topic, link in the description, assuming I don't forget it again. And this video all explains why Zesshi might join Nazarick and under what conditions. So yes, there's a definitive possibility that Ainz will train Zesshi, or at least accept her. If not as a member of the Great Tomb, then as a tool of it, and as a citizen of the Sorcerer Kingdom. And with that said, we continue. Ainz could also simply use Wish upon a star, a ring that still has 2 charges left, and it allows him to use the Wish type spell without consuming experience points, and he could also use it to raise Zeshi's level cap to match his very own. And since we're only talking about the difference of around 12 levels, it's likely the ring could manage that, possibly even without consuming any charges at all. Alternatively, Ainz could search the new world for individuals with a talent that would naturally raise the level cap by at least 12, and then use magic to transfer that talent to äzesshizetsumei as well. Otherwise, only wild magic from the dragons or world items would likely help, and I think the most probable option would be through Nazarick, the queen of the Dragon Kingdom. She likely wouldn't have any problems helping Ainz with his Zesshi project, and in exchange for this Zesshi leveling arc, she could enter a stable alliance with Ainz and the Great Tomb of Nazarick and his Sorcerer Kingdom. And she'd probably only need a few 100,000 souls to power this spell that she needs, but considering that Ainz plans to attack and likely crush the Theocracy of Slain in a massive all-out campaign, and that Mara's world item, Avarice and Generosity, has already absorbed a large number of experience points, thanks to the battle on the Cuts Plains, it shouldn't be a problem to get that many sacrifices. If not, then Ainz would simply need to take some prisoners, but even in the worst case scenario, it should still be possible to break her level limit with enough dedication. And that leads to the next question. How would Ainz proceed from here? How would Zesshi be trained? And what methods or tools would be used in her training? And the first item we will look at is, let's call it a friendship ring. It looks like a steel ring, a choker, a collar, and basically it is one, but it affects only the experience points gained and the level stats. It is not a true leash, not a true collar, nothing to actually subjugate people. And I know it might still sound a bit convenient to bind Zesshi to Nazarick in this different way, but the ring really does work exactly as I have described. It ups the experience points gained, but in exchange one's own stats are lowered only for the duration that this item is equipped. And both the lizardman who trained on Nazarick's 6th floor and Ainz himself, when he fought in the amphitheater against Team Foresight, which by the way might be the most ironically named team in all of Overlord, have used this item. In other words, with this training gear, Zesshi will gain experience significantly faster, and in my opinion one of the main reasons she hasn't reached level 100 yet is simply the lack of worthy opponents. Anyone above level 10 or 20 is already rare. And if you ever played a Pokemon game as a kid, you probably let your starter Pokemon defeat everything, simply because it was the easiest strategy. So easy that even AI in early games used it to play through the story in, for example, Red and Blue, and I think Gold and Silver was also done by AI by now, even though it had taken like 50 hours. But even then, your Charizard probably never reached level 70 or 80, because over time, your opponents became far too weak compared to your own level and the amount of experience points required for each new level, and it just became too much, too massive. And most enemies in those games, at least in the second half, are usually only around level 30 to 40, with some reaching 50 and if you select one, 60. And remember, in the new world of Overlord, only 1 in a million people will reach level 30. Now if you also consider things like sleeping, eating and the fact that Zesshi serves as the guardian of her ancestors' legendary artifacts, and spending her times more with Rubik cubes rather than fighting, and that Platinum Dragonlord likely used diplomatic pressure to prevent her from being deployed offensively, then Zesshi has had almost no opportunity to fight opponents at level 30 or 40, which explains why even after a century she still hasn't reached her maximum level. And in the Great Tomb of Nazarick, however, where there are numerous creatures at level 100 and plenty of healers capable of quickly restoring Zeshi's health to basically full potential, especially considering that there's a ring which grants her infinite stamina and even potions with the same effect. It shouldn't be a problem at all to train Zesshi nearly 24 hours a day. And her main challenge would most likely be her traumatic childhood memories and her relationship with her mother, but that's a topic for another day. In battles against superior opponents, such as Cocytus, Mare, or Pandora's Actor, she would likely be able to reach level 100 within weeks or months. So the question that remains is, what does Ainz gain from all of this? After all, yes, Zesshi of course is powerful, but Mare is stronger than her, and many others in Nazarick are as well. Not to mention that Ainz commands legions of the undead, numerous high-level entities within Nazarick, and over 100,000 pop monsters. Trash-tier beings, but again, quantity is a quality of all of its own, even if they don't exceed level 30. And of course, he is the Sorcerer King. So why would Ainz even want to train Zesshi? And the answer, in my opinion, lies in her skills. Zesshi possesses the ability Psychometry, meaning she can use the skills of anyone whose armor or items she wears. And because of that, her character build is somewhat chaotic, yet incredibly versatile. Still, the ability to use both ein Herrier and the god of all life is death is absolutely insane. And therefore, for instance, Ainz could have her wear Ulbert Elaine Oddle's cylinder head and train her until she could eventually use this most powerful spell of his, Grand Catastrophe. Or he could give her Touch Me's equipment, that of a world champion, allowing her to use World Break or Dimensional Slash. In other words, Zesshi could learn up to 12 additional, completely overpowered abilities from within the Grey Tomb of Nazarick, and from the strongest beings within it, and perhaps even inherit the abilities of Rubedo, the strongest being in Nazarick, and Albedo's younger sister. She could also take on utility roles. For example, she could learn Auriel Omega's teleportation skills, allowing her to act as a substitute in those very functions, so that the Pleiades sisters could be deployed in their Seven Sister formation during battle. And of course, if Ainz wanted to fully harness her abilities, he might need to retrain Zesshi from scratch, resetting her level as much as possible and then rebuilding her character build properly with a more fitting build. In other words, Ainz has very good reasons to train Zesshi and to optimize her character, as long as she remains aligned with Nazarick. And with that said, now it's your turn. What do you think about the topic of Zesshi, her skills, her abilities, her training, and her immense potential, given how much equipment Ainz has of his friends that is still left? Let me know it down in the comment section. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching, and thanks to all of my Patreons for supporting this channel. And of course, I say my special thanks to Other Daddy Other, ASK, Bad Girl Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon S, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Din Pep, Dragonlord Placido Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feralshivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Le Louche Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lofthraiser, Merwek, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pentum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Q&A Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenokai, and Sonegon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.